What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I thought I would jump on here for a little bit of a mid-afternoon crochet break, and I wanted to show you this yarn that I got and I'm really excited about. I picked up a few cakes of this Premier Spun Colors yarn. It is 65% acrylic, 35% fine superwash merino. The cake is quite big. It comes in 419 yards, and I mean, look at those colors. I have been really into bold variegated yarn lately. I think that's what it's called, variegated. Just multicolored yarn that is not striping. It just sort of, the colors just sort of appear in almost a randomized pattern. And this yarn is so soft and fluffy, and it's warm, and it's still February in New York and kind of cold, but we're some of the last legs of winter, so I wanted to do something else in wool before it starts getting too hot to work in or wear wool this spring and summer. It gets really humid and hot in New York. So yeah, this is an end of winter, gloomy, rainy day. It's been raining in New York for a whole week. Project. The last project I wrapped up was yesterday. I finished a granny square cardigan, and I hadn't done like a traditional granny square cardigan ever. Like I did like a chunky granny square cardigan in early days, a couple of months ago when I first started to learn how to crochet, and it didn't work out well because it was so heavy. So I wanted to try a more traditional granny square. So after doing that, which involved like dozens of different colors and different skeins of yarn, I wanted to do something a little bit more straightforward. And so I started this project yesterday, and I wanted to share it with you. I have been loving round yoke, top down sweater construction. I've been doing a lot of cardigans like this, and I think that works better in some yarns than other yarns because you need the yarn to have some sort of structure actually to hold the shape after you put it on. At least for me, I am not like I'm not a small person, but what I have found is that a yarn that is more substantial and has better structure makes for a better cardigan with top-down round yoke construction. But I wanted to create something for myself to wear that is casual, is fun, but doesn't look like something that, you know, I just bought in a store or something I just randomly ordered online. I wanted to have a little bit of a handcrafted, personalized feel. So I decided to take this yarn, and I wanted to do a sweatshirt type fit pullover sweater. And this is what I'm doing. So it's very straightforward. It's a round yoke, and how I cast on is, I think cast on's the right word. How I chained was, instead of doing a chain foundation with round yoke, I find that starting with a FSC, foundation single crochet, is a little bit easier to work with. I find that doing these round yoke sweaters, the first couple of rows are the most fiddly, like the chain is like twisting, you're looking for the loop. Starting with a foundation single crochet gives a much more substantial foundation that for me is easier to work with. And then from there, I didn't attach it right away. You can see up here, I did the first few rows without attaching it, but I did a couple of rows, and it's all double crochet. So very, very straightforward, no switching stitches. And I would increase every 1/10 of the row, and not every 10 stitches, but every 1/10 of the row. And some people increase every 1/12. I have done that too, and it does tend to give you actually a more even circle, because like this is a circle. I don't know if the whole thing will fit in the frame, but it's a circle, and then when you fold it over, it becomes the top of the sweater. I think the argument for increasing every 1/10 of the row is that it becomes easier later on to figure out where you separate and attach for the sleeve part, and like, you know, separate the body from the sleeve, which I guess I'll do in a few rows. Because the algebra, I mean, I can't believe that we're actually using algebra, but algebra is super, super important in crochet. So the ratio that's most common that I've seen for, you know, for beginners to learn how to do this online, which I am, I'm a beginner, is the front panel is 3x, so it's a ratio of 3, and each sleeve is a ratio of 2. So 1, 1, 1, 1, and then the back panel is a ratio of 3. And think of this as sections of a pie. So 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 is 10. And it's way easier to divide your sections and your increases. You can see where the increases are. It's easier to do that visually than when I've increased every 12th of every row, in which case by the time you decide you want to attach the underarms of the sleeves, you have to sit there and you have to count, and then it becomes like a whole thing because I always miscount, and then you have to divide that by 10. Anyway, it's a whole thing. So actually for just like a fun casual project for a pullover sweater for myself in this fun yarn that I really want to use, I just increased every 1/10 of a row, which gives you this sort of shape. Now, the manufacturer suggests to use a 5mm hook. And I did do a swatch with a 5mm hook, and I thought it was a little bit too loose. Personally, I am not super interested in wearing something that is a little bit too loose. I prefer my sweaters to be a bit more, the gauge to be a bit more tight. So after trying the 5mm hook, I frogged it. This yarn does not frog well, by the way, so just be aware of that before you do too much and decide to frog. It doesn't frog well. It actually gets knotted up and it's really hard to separate. But I had to clip a bunch of that off, and then I ended up doing a swatch with a 4mm hook, which I think was better than the 5mm hook. But you see how the 4mm hook is also a very loose gauge. And I think this would have been fine, but I mean, it's very holy. You can like see right through it. So I thought this would be fine, but then since I have hooks that are smaller, I thought I would try a 3.5mm hook. Now I could have probably gone even smaller than a 3.5mm hook, but there are parts of this yarn where it does get like a little bit fluffy, so it would have been harder to work with a much smaller hook. So I wound up using a 3.5mm hook. This is a tulip hook that I bought in a set of tulip hooks from Amazon, and then it's shipped from Amazon Japan because tulip hooks are from Japan. And I thought that was pretty cool. You order something from Amazon and it's shipped from Amazon Japan. I got a set of 13 of these hooks for $40, which I think is a pretty good deal that shipped, for free from Japan. And so that's what I'm using. And this is the kind of gauge that I've ended up with. So there obviously are still like gaps in between the stitches because it's crochet, and that's just, how it looks when you do a double crochet. But I think this is like way more wearable, and I would be comfortable wearing this over like a tank top or like a camisole of some kind and not feel like I needed to wear a full turtleneck or a full shirt underneath in order to, to feel comfortable going outside in a sweater like this. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with the neckline, but I think I would like to do, I saw this done on a blanket. I need to look up this tutorial because I've never done it before. I saw a double-faced edging done on a blanket, and I don't know if I could take that technique and make a double-faced rib to put around the neck, because I think this would look really nice with a slightly more structured, substantial neckline. And if not that, then I will just do a standard rib, probably around 2 inches, and probably I would try to do it with a smaller hook, just so it like really pulls it together. So yeah, so I'm at this point here. I'm almost at the point where I'm going to attach the underarms, but I thought I would do a little crochet along on camera because I don't know, I really like watching crochet alongs on camera, and a little talking maybe because I don't know if you do this too, but I definitely talk to myself when I'm crocheting if I'm not like watching a video or a movie or a TV show or something. This weekend, I actually made all of the granny squares for my granny square cardigan. I'll pop a picture of the cardigan on screen right here so you can see it's my first, like, real granny square cardigan, and I really enjoyed making it, but I had to make, like, 46 or 48 granny squares in all these different colors. I wanted all the granny squares to be different colors, so I had to make a whole bunch of granny squares for the cardigan, and what I did while I was making them was I binge watched. I signed up for Hulu, and they have, like, a 30-day free trial, so I sort of wanna see if I like it before I fully subscribe, but I signed up for Hulu, and I watched the entire series of Fleischman is in Trouble. I don't know if you've seen that. I read the Fleischman is in Trouble book in 2020. I was living in Hong Kong, and I think I bought it at, like, the local English bookstore. Maybe it was in Landmark. There's a shopping mall called Landmark, and there's a great English bookstore there in the center of Hong Kong. And I bought the book. I love the book. The book is written by Taffy Brodesser-Akner, who's a really famous profile writer for big publications, like massive, massive publications. She's a great celebrity profiler. And I believe this is her first fiction novel. The book is fantastic. It's called Fleischman's in Trouble. And the series on Hulu stars Claire Danes, who I love, who I've been watching since My So-Called Life in the 90s. That is, like, one of my favorite shows of all time, especially because that show, it was it was about high schoolers when I was in high school, so it felt very relatable, and I think looking back now, I have watched it. I haven't watched it in, like, maybe 10 years. Maybe I'll watch it again because it's also on Hulu. But, that show really just captured the spirit of, like, a time and a place right before the internet got really big. So it was, like, the mid-90s, it's Claire Danes, the characters were so 90s, the music is so 90s, and the vibe and the clothes and everything, and it was just a time right before I mean, it was a time right before we all had all this information at the tip of our fingers, and it's sort of a time before we all knew way too much. I mean, now you can just we all walk around with these Google machines in our pockets, and all the information you want or need or can look up is so easily accessible, but this was a time when it wasn't, and there was a real, like, beauty to that, right? I don't know if you lived through the 90s, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I've been watching Claire Danes since then. I've always loved her. I've always thought she was brilliant. She's in the series. Jesse Eisenberg from The Social Network, is that the Facebook movie? He's in the series, and they're all like tons of famous people who appear in the series. And I think one of the most interesting things about Fleischman is in Trouble is that New York City is such a main character in the film. I don't think it's I mean, and maybe it could have happened. It could be set in LA. But really, there's something very, very New York about this series, about the story, and about this book. And it really captures this moment of, like, the mid 2010s in New York City. A lot of the anxiety, a lot of, like, us as people worrying about things that now post COVID really just seem so remote, and things that, with the perspective of hindsight may not have been that important. Anyway, so I made 46 granny squares while watching Fleischman is in Trouble. And that's what I've been doing. I've sort of been putting on these TV series and movies that I've been wanting to watch. And ooh, there's some, like, weird. There's, like, a bit of wire. It's not wire, it's like a hard piece. It's almost like I don't know if you can see that. It looks like fluff, but it's quite hard. That's weird. Let's put that over there. What else I've been watching lately that I've really loved? You know what I've watched? I don't know if you've watched this. There's a Korean reality show on Netflix that's relatively new. It just wrapped up this week. It's called Physical 100, and it's like the top athletes and bodybuilders and CrossFitters from Korea all competing in just a series of very strange challenges. Some of the challenges are very like mind over matter, and some of them are strength based, some of them are endurance based, and some of them are just skill and speed based. So I watched that. That wrapped up this week. That was interesting. And yeah, I think I watched, you know what I'm obsessed with? I'm obsessed with fundamentalist religions. And so I watched a few documentaries about different sects and fundamentalist religions on, any streaming platform. I find that I have like too many streaming subscriptions, but I don't know which one to cut. And I have like such FOMO if I unsubscribe to something and then they release a really great series that everyone's talking about. I don't know how everyone does it. It gets quite expensive. I think cutting the cord from cable was one thing, and it felt like that saved money. But then now everything is just piecemeal, right? So instead of paying whatever, like $70 a month for all the cable channels, which I still do, by the way, because I subscribe to YouTube TV just so I can have terrestrial TV in case something happens or in case I need to watch the news. But on top of that, now you have Netflix. I unsubscribed to HBO Max for a little while because I was like, oh, there's nothing new that I want to watch. But they release like new series on there that I feel like I really want. I don't know. Maybe it's a symptom of just staying in too much. I also need to get out a little bit more. I will say that the downside of watching TV while crocheting is that sometimes if something exciting happens on the screen, I will stop paying attention to my crochet and I will do things like I will miss increases, I'll miss stitches, less missing stitches and more missing important points in crochet, like increases or things like that. But what I do love about crochet is that it is fairly forgiving. If I really mess up, I will go back and fix it. But usually, if it's just something that like no one else can tell and only I can tell that there's been a mistake, I will just leave it. A lot of my friends have asked me if I would ever sell my crochet stuff. I don't think I would, because I just don't think I'm at that level where I'm creating things that are perfect enough or consumer ready enough. Even when I give things as gifts to people, I get nervous that like, not nervous is not the right word. I feel like I want to make sure that it's something that I'm not just giving them that's going to be like another piece of stuff or junk that has to lie around their house. I try to make things for people that are either small enough to not take up that much space or something that they'll actually wear or use. I think that's part of the reason why I think making sweaters and less so blankets, because I mean, I know there's like a huge blanket crocheting community on the web and on YouTube, but a blanket for me feels like such a big commitment, literally a big commitment. I have made a blanket before for myself and I made one for my mom, but that's my mom, like I'll make her a million blankets if she wants. I am mostly interested in making sweaters though. I don't know why. I think I mentioned this in my last video that making wearables like sweaters and cardigans, it feels so satisfying to me when I complete the project. Like, it just feels there's like a different sense of, I kept on saying this word in my last video. It's a different sense of gratification than any other kind of project. When I finish amigurumi, if I make like a cute little thing or a cute little animal, it feels exciting, and I'm like, I love cute things, and you put little like beady eyes on anything, and I think it's cute. But there's something about creating something that's wearable and practical, that goes on your body, that becomes a part of you and how you present yourself to the world. I mean, that's why I've always loved fashion. That's why I went to fashion school a million years ago. It's because there's something about fashion that is an outside reflection of everything that's going on inside. Or at least, it's like the North Star ideal. I don't really ever plan or think too much about what I'm doing next until after I'm like at the end of a project or just before I'm at the end of the project. I'm very yarn inspired. So, I mean, the granny square cardigan I did because I have so much solid colored yarn in worsted weight in my apartment that I thought I should do something that I hadn't done before that feels like a classic crochet project. And I wanted to find a way to use all of that yarn. I looked for inspiration. I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but when I went to the Vogue knitting conference last week or 2 weeks ago, they had fashion shows of all these beautiful designs that designers and knitters and people created from specific yarn brands that they had. Like, I think there was like a Rowan show. It was like a runway show with models wearing crochet and knit garments and stuff, and it was really cool to see what people had made, especially that close when you're in that kind of conference room or ballroom setting. But I have one of my really, really close friends is the head of, I don't know, a sweaters. I don't know what it's technical. I don't know what his official title is, but he's in charge of all the knitting and the crocheting pieces for like a super luxury fashion house in Paris. And one of the places I love to get inspiration is literally going on these luxury shopping websites like Matches Fashion or Farfetch or Net-a-Porter and typing in crochet and seeing what ultra high-end designers are doing with crochet right now. So for example, if you go to Net-a-Porter or matchesfashion.com, you type in crochet, because crochet is all hand done, it's not like you're looking at knits, because knitwear, if you just go and look at knitwear and knitting, a lot of knitwear is done by machine, so it's not something you can replicate at home. But because crochet cannot be replicated by machine, when you look at these pieces online and you look at these brands like Miu Miu has like a bunch of crochet stuff this season. Missoni, obviously, so much of Missoni clothes are crochet. There's a brand that's like a contemporary brand, I think it's called Farm Rio or something like that, where there's like a lot of crochet pieces, and I get a lot of inspiration looking at those pieces from ultra high-end designers because crochet is so trendy right now, and I didn't realize that when I picked up the hobby last fall. But right now, and if you look at runway shows happening now that are about, like, they're showing clothes that are going into stores 6 months from now, there's so much crochet that's going into super high-end stores. So I think there's something here. I think I like that. I mean, I don't need crochet to be trendy or cool or fashiony for me to be interested in doing it, because I just really enjoy it. But it's nice to look at that and feel like, oh, like there's some ideas there that are really interesting. So yeah, so that's what I do sometimes. So I'll look at what's out there in terms of runway, like Paris runway crochet, and see if there are some ideas there that I can try or I can learn. And now that I've been crocheting just for a few months, it's nice to look at crochet pieces in stores and on runways and, like, kind of be able to figure out how they made it, which is not an experience I have ever had with other apparel. Like, I know how clothes are made because I went to fashion school and I understand that, you cut a pattern and then you do a toile and then, you make samples and then you tweak and stuff like that, but I would not be able to do it. Like, if you handed me a pair of scissors, like a and like a pencil and some muslin, I would not be able to construct a garment, never mind draping. With crochet, it all seems a little bit more attainable, which is kind of nice. I don't know. I like that feeling. Anyway, it's all a long way to say that I really like crocheting clothes. One of the things I love about variegated yarn is that every time you make a stitch, it's kind of like a surprise to see how it turns out. Look, we've done most of this row just on camera, and it's just already changed color so many times. I keep on doing this because, to be completely honest, I have totally lost count of where I'm increasing. So to figure out where I'm increasing, I literally just look for the last increase that I've done, and I do my increase on top of that increase. So I think in the beginning when I was doing round yoke top-down garments, I would use a stitch counter, and I would literally click the stitch counter after I finished every row to know how many stitches I had to do in between every increase in the next row. But it's not very practical if you're doing larger garments. Um, and so now I just do increases based on the previous row's increase. So you can see here, I just increased here, and it's on top of the last row's increase, and that's on, etc. Which I think is easier, although it is something that you miss if you're not paying attention and you're watching TV, like I often do. So there are some rows where I have forgotten to increase in certain places. And I think if it looks super obvious, for example, if it's very early on, if it's like in the first couple of rows, I will go back and I will fix it. But if we're already like this far into the garment and I forget to increase here or there, usually not that big of a deal, especially in this kind of yarn weight. And even though this is, I think, is technically a yarn weight 4, it does get very thin in some places. Like here, this is like a very, 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 very light 4 or even just a 3. And then in some places it gets even further down it's almost like a sock weight. And then in other places, this yarn will get really fluffy and it gets almost like like jumbo chunky. Like is that a size? I'm not sure. So this yarn is sort of all over the place, which was also one of the reasons why I mentioned I couldn't go any smaller with the hook, because I think a 3 millimeter hook, at some points, it wouldn't even pick up the yarn. I really struggle with the 3.5 sometimes when the yarn gets really fluffy. I sort of have to just, by sheer force of will, yarn over. Already 3:15. I'm already starting to lose light. I guess it's because it's cloudy outside today. I had a breakfast meeting this morning at 8 a.m., which is like the earliest meeting I've had in a long time. I am trying to change my circadian rhythm. Like this winter got really bad where I was waking up pretty late every day because of, it's like colder in the winter and darker. So it's good. I had a breakfast meeting this morning at 8, and I have a breakfast meeting tomorrow at 8. I don't want this to become a habit or a regular thing because I think it kind of throws off my morning and makes me less likely to do things like go to the gym. But it is good because it did force me to get up around 6:30 and make sure I have a coffee and I'm at least semi-awake before I meet people. Although I probably did have too much coffee this morning because of it. Oh, see, I forgot. I forgot to increase there. I guess I could use stitch markers, but it's kind of a pain in the neck to undo stitch markers all the time and redo them. I find stitch markers really useful when I'm doing things like, is it called petal stitch or fan stitch? The one where you're doing like 5 double crochets in one stitch, and then you need to work the second one somehow, or like the crochet space, and I find that stitch markers are super useful for that. Also for like lighter weight yarn when I'm doing ribs and stuff, because I always forget where like the last chain is, the last stitch I need to turn in is. Is this boring? Watching me double crochet? You know what's funny is that I actually have a few friends who crochet, who are avid crocheters, and a lot of us work in the same industry. So a lot of us work in media or in fashion. There are a lot of people who crochet and knit, and I think it's interesting because these are such introverted hobbies. It's like having a cat or something. It's like, I mean, I don't have a cat, but it's something that's usually a stay at home, do it alone sort of thing. It's not like people are walking cats outside on the streets of New York. Like if you have a dog, it's pretty obvious when you have a dog because you have to walk it and take it in public. But not a lot of people crochet in public in New York. There just aren't coffee shops or venues or places where it's that comfortable to hang out for long periods of time and crochet. Oh no, I forgot to increase again. But from talking to a lot of people about my crochet, or just by posting my crochet things that I've been learning to do on my Instagram, a lot of people I know have DM'd me to tell me that they also crochet and knit. I kind of wish there was an event or almost like a book club for people who do yarn things to get together, maybe like have a coffee or a cocktail hour once a week or twice a month or something like that, where people can, get out of their house and do their favorite hobby together in one place instead of at home alone. I do think, I mean, I love crochet. I just like love sitting at home and crocheting endlessly and not talking to anybody. But I think there's something about this post-pandemic era that we live in where even though it's hard to get back to socializing and doing group things and packing your schedule because it feels exhausting, it's also, I don't know if it's, like, good for us too to do it, you know? Like, I try to say yes to invitations as much as possible just because I know I have a tendency to choose the comfortable option. Like, I would, of course, always rather just stay home wearing sweatpants and watch Netflix and crochet, but I know it's not good for my mental health in the long run, and so I do usually try to say yes whenever I can or whenever it doesn't conflict with, you know, activities or things I have to do, to social invitations, to group dinners, and things like that. It would be fun to do a crochet event. I would love to go to, like, a beautiful cocktail bar and sit and crochet on, like, a Monday or Tuesday night. Seems like fun. Although I feel like I would make a lot of mistakes in my crochet if I had one drink. What am I increasing next? Here. Okay. Let's see how far I have to go. So this is where in another cardigan I did, where I attached it here. Obviously, I did like a few rows without attaching it. Obviously, I did a few rows without attaching it, and I attached it here. And in a cardigan, and you can see where I sort of did this here as well. When I attached it, I turned, right? So at the end of this row, I attached it, then I chained one and I turned, and that's why you see the continuation of the green that goes this way. But in an old cardigan that I was working on, like one from like last week, what I was working on, because I was working in a variegated yarn, chaining and turning doesn't give you the continuous stripe, and it actually looks way better. See, again, here, I also turned here. You can tell because there's a gap. It looks way better crocheting in the round and not turning because you get the continuous stripe, which I think is like less obvious in this yarn because the colors are kind of random. But what I'll do is I'll stitch this up using like a mattress stitch or something afterwards, and it should be fine. So we're almost back at the seam, and when we're back at the seam, I'm going to see how close we are to the measurement where I would attach the underarm bits. Let's see, where do we increase again? I think we'll increase again here. Okay. Okay, so I think, so here's where the seam is the last increase. Okay, so let's put a stitch marker here and we'll see. So this is a very non-scientific way. I know, so some guides, they recommend getting a sweater or a shirt that you really like the fit of and holding it up against your sweater to see, or the yoke, to see where you would attach the arms. I'm not doing that because I don't know why, but I think it's because I don't have like a sweater or a shirt that I would want to mimic the fit of, because I think like cotton t-shirts and things like that, it's a totally different kind of garment. And plus this has way more give. It has like a lot of stretch and a lot of give. So I just go like this and I see. So what I'll do is underneath each arm where I attach it, I will chain. So I'll do a foundation single crochet, again because it's more substantial and easier to see and work with, I think, than just a simple chain. So I'll do 15 foundational single crochets. So I do want, it doesn't have to be like exactly at the armpit, because we will be chaining about 4 inches underneath, but I still think I'm probably, and this is so unscientific, but I sort of know my own body. I probably need 2 more double crochet rows here before I get the fit I want, because I do want this to be slightly like a sweatshirt fit sweater. Not like an oversized, not like a champion sweatshirt, like fit sweater, not that kind of like really oversized, but like almost like a 1970s phys ed high school gym uniform sweatshirt fit. So not fitted, but also not totally oversized. So I'm going to go for that. So yeah, I'm going to keep going, and that's it. That's all I got. How long have I been doing this for? Is there a counter? So yeah, I'm going to keep on working on that. I thought I would get to the underarm bit on this video, but I'm talking nonstop for 40 minutes. So I'm going to do that, and I will probably post a short on this sweater later on, or I'll continue this in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you in the next time.